In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to create these dumbbell weights in Blender. So this is going to be a two-part tutorial series. So in part 1, we are going to be modeling the dumbbell weights. And then in part 2, we're going to be doing the lighting and the materials and posing the dumbbell weights in the scene and getting this final render here. So I have some dumbbells very similar to this. I do weightlifting myself, and I was doing some weightlifting a few days ago, and I thought that the dumbbell weights had some really cool shapes, and I also liked the really cool metal materials on them, and so I thought it would be cool to create them in Blender. If you'd like to help support me and this channel so I can continue to make Blender tutorials and content, then you can purchase the project files of this tutorial on my Gumroad store and my Patreon page. I'll have the links in the description. And checking out my Gumroad store and my Patreon page and the YouTube memberships are all great ways to help support this channel. And if you enjoy this tutorial series and you'd like to give me a little tip, you can also use the super thanks feature here on YouTube, and I do appreciate your support. Now there are a few different resources online that I'm going to be using for the tutorial. So to get some nice realistic lighting and reflections, I'm going to be using this Courtyard HDRI, and this is a free HDRI from polyhaven.com, and all the links will be in the description to the resources that I'm going to be using. So I'm going to be using the 1K version and also the HDR version of this HDRI, and then you can just download this. Now all of the materials in the final scene are mostly going to be procedural. However, I am going to be using a few textures from this Metal 001. So this is a free metal material from Ambient CG. Again, links in the description if you'd like to download it. So I'm going to be downloading the 4K JPEG version. And when you download that, it'll give you a zip file, and you can just extract the zip file. And then in the extracted folder, there will be the textures. And so most of the materials are going to be created procedurally in Blender, but I am going to be using a few of the texture maps in this metal to get that cool scratched effect. And then for the concrete on the ground, I'm going to be using my procedural smooth concrete material. And I have a tutorial on how to create this procedural smooth concrete. So again, links in the description if you'd like to watch that tutorial. You can learn how to create the procedural smooth concrete, and then we'll be adding it into our 3D scene in Blender. Or if you'd like to help support me and this channel, you can also purchase the procedural smooth concrete material on my Gumroad store. Link is in the description. Or use really whatever ground material you want underneath the dumbbells. Alright, so here we are in a new scene in Blender. Now right down here in the corner are my screencast keys so you can see what buttons I'm pressing. So I'm going to press the A key to select everything, and then I'm going to press the X key and we're going to click on delete. Always make sure you delete the default cube. Now to create that screw part on the side of the dumbbell weights, I'm going to be using Blender's built-in bolt add-on. So to enable the add-on, we can click on edit, and then we can go here to the preferences. And then in Blender's user preferences, you can click on the add-ons tab, and up here on the search, you can search for bolt. And when you type in bolt, you can see there is this add mesh bolt factory. So you can just check mark that to turn it on, and it's built into Blender, so you don't need to download or install anything. You can just check mark it and it'll be turned on in Blender, and I'll show you how to use the add-on. And then while we're here in the user preferences, later on in the tutorial series, I'm also going to be using the Node Wrangler add-on, so you can search for node and just check mark the Node Wrangler add-on, and again, that add-on is built into Blender. And then also later on for some of the modeling later in this part, I am also going to be using the loop tools add-on, and again, this one is built into Blender, so you can search for a loop and then you can just check mark the loop tools Blender add-on. So let's get started by creating that handle for the adjustable dumbbells. So I'm going to press Shift A, and we're going to go here to mesh, and if you go right down here, because we turned on the bolt factory add-on, you can see it says bolt right here. So just click on bolt, and then right after you add the bolt, before you click away or anything, right above me you can see that there's these add bolt settings. You can just click on the arrow to open this up. Now for some reason you click away from the bolt, like let me just press the A key to deselect the bolt. Now you can see that that setting is gone. So if you've clicked away from the bolt or moved it around or selected a different object, you can just click on the bolt, and then using the object context menu you can then click on change bolt. And I use the right click select, so I hit the W key for the object context menu, but you can also just right click and then you can click on change bolt. And when you do that, then the add bolt settings are going to come back up right here. Now to make these dumbbell weights as accurate as possible, I actually took them apart and laid them on the ground, and then I took some different reference images and also took some reference images close up to kind of get some images of the metal, but also I took some reference images to try to get the size correct. So I'm going to show you the different settings that I found that work best. So this shank length right here is going to change that little length there, which is between the bolt and the screw. So I'm going to change the shank length to a 0.8. Now the thread length is going to change how many threads there are. So you can see if I turn this up, there's going to be more of the screw. So I'm going to turn the thread length to 14. That works pretty well. Now there is also this major diameter. So when I turn this up, it's going to make the screw bigger. So I'm going to change the major diameter to a 3.1. I think a 3.1 is pretty good. And then the minor diameter is going to change the smallest size of the screw. So I'm going to turn the minor diameter to a 2.4. Now there is also a pinch here, and the pinch is actually going to change like the width of the screw. So I'm going to change the pinch to a 0.65. I think a 0.65 is pretty good, so they're much bigger. Now if you zoom in here and change the crest percent, that is going to change the size of the flat area. So I'm going to change the crest percent to a 23, and that way it's a bit thicker. And then there is also the root percent, and that's going to change the thickness of the smallest area. So I'm going to change the root percent to a 51. All right, and that is it. So that is the very side there of the actual handle for the dumbbell weights. So I'm going to click right here to get rid of the add bolt settings, and then let's also save the Blender file. So I'm going to click on File and then click on Save As. And I'm just going to save this as dumbbellweights.blend in a folder on my computer, and I will click on Save As. And then this timeline right down here, we don't actually need this. So I'm going to hover my mouse right here in the corner and click and then drag up and then drag down and then let go just to close the timeline. All right, so we can now press the tab key to go into edit mode, and I want to delete this top part up here because we don't actually need this because we're not actually creating a bolt. So I'm going to press the 1 on the numpad. That's going to take me to front view. I'm going to zoom in here, and then I can hold down the Z button and go into wireframe. Then I can press the A key to deselect, and I want to just select the top part and delete it. So I'm going to press B for the box select, and I'm just going to click and just drag a box around these vertices here, and then I can press X and we're going to delete the vertices. So I can hold down the Z button and go back to solid view, and then I'm going to hold down the Alt key and select this loop right there. So when you hold down the Alt key and select a loop, that's going to select the ring of vertices or the loop of vertices. So I now want to extrude this part up, so I'm going to press E to extrude and then hit Z to bring it up on the Z axis, and we're going to bring this up to about there. So if I zoom out here, the circular weight plates are going to go in here, and then there's going to be that little star screw piece which is going to screw on. And so then right up here there's going to be the handle, and then I'm going to add a mirror modifier to mirror this whole thing over to the other side. So I need to make this metal part thicker so that the weight plates stop right here and they don't continue to go to the handle area. So I'm going to press 1 on the numpad to go back to front view, and I'm going to zoom in here. So I'm going to press E to extrude, and then I'm going to hit S to scale, and I'm just going to scale this up and make it about that big. Then I'm going to press E to extrude, and I'm going to hit Z to bring it up on the Z axis, and we're going to place that about there. Maybe just bring it up a little bit farther, and then I want to extrude this and scale it down, and they'll make the handle area. So I'm going to press E to extrude, we'll bring this up again on the Z axis, place it there. Then I can scale this down, and we're going to make that a bit smaller, maybe bring it down a little bit. So I can now press E to extrude and then hit Z. We'll bring this up on the Z axis and place that about there. So I'm now going to press the tab key to go back to object mode, and I now want to mirror this over to the other side. So I'm going to click right here on the modifier properties, and I'm going to click on add modifier, and under generate I can go right here and add the mirror modifier. Now if I zoom in here, right now you can see it's mirroring it over on the x-axis, so it's actually overlapping, but I don't want to mirror it on the x-axis. The x-axis is this red line going back and forth here. I want to mirror on the z-axis, which is going up and down. So I can click on the x to turn that off, and I'm going to instead turn on the z-axis. Now you can see it's mirroring it down on the other side, and that's because the origin point is in the very center here. So the mirror modifier will mirror objects from the object's origin. So the object's origin is always the center of where it's mirroring. So to fix this, I can just press the tab key to go into edit mode, press the A key to make sure everything is selected, and I can press G and then Z, and we're just going to bring this down and just flip that. And then I want to press G and Z and just push this into each other. Now I want the very center to be merging together. So to do this, right here on the Mirror Modifier, I can turn on the clipping button, and now I can press G and then Z and bring it down. And you can see when I pull it down far enough, the center is going to be merged together because we turned on the clipping. So I'm now going to press 1 on the numpad to go to front view. And so now I just want to adjust the size of this. So you can see that Blender has these little grids here. And I want to make this side of the bar be a little over 2 grids long. So you can see there is 1 grid there and then 2 grids there. So right now it's a little bit too far out. So I'm going to press G and Z and just bring this back in a bit and place it about there. So it's a little bigger than 2 grids. Maybe bring it out a little bit on the Z axis. Press the tab key to go back to object mode, and that is a good size. Now right here, this is actually a little bit long. So I'm going to press 1 on the numpad to go back to front view and press the tab key to go to edit mode. I can hold down the Z button and move my mouse to wireframe, and then I can press the A key to deselect everything. So I'm now going to press B for the box select. I'm just going to drag a box around these vertices here, and I can press G and Z, and I'm just going to bring that down a little bit. Go back to solid view and tab to go back to object mode, and that is looking better. Now right here in the center where the grip is, I actually want this to pop out a little bit so it's a little bit thicker where you'd actually grip the dumbbell. So I'm going to press the tab key to go back into edit mode, and I'm going to zoom in here. So I'm going to press Control R to add a loop cut, and then I'm going to click and I'm going to drag way down and place that about there. Then I'm going to press Control R again to add another loop cut, and I'm going to click and drag this down and place that one about there. And I'm going to leave a little bit of space there. So I can now hold down the Shift and Alt key, and I'm going to select right here to select that loop. So this is where you're actually going to grip the dumbbell. So I want to make this a little bit thicker. So I'm going to press S to scale, and let's just bring that up a little bit and then place it there. I don't want to make it much thicker, but I do want to scale it up just a little bit. And then I also want to bring it up a bit, so I'm going to press G and Z and bring that up a little bit. And then I think I also might hold down the Alt key and just select that loop right there, and I can press G and Z and bring the whole thing up just a little bit more. Now I want to add a bevel right here because that is a little bit sharp, and I want it to be a very smooth transition so it kind of just curves down. So I'm going to hold down the Alt key and select that loop right there. And to add a bevel, I'm going to press Control B. So Control B is going to add a bevel, and I'm going to scroll my mouse wheel out just 2 times so that there's a little bit more detail in the bevel, and just bring it up and then place it right about there. So if I tab to go back to object mode, you can now see this grip just gets scaled down a little bit and then it goes in. Now I actually think I want this area to be scaled down just a little bit more. So I'm going to tab to go into edit mode. I'm going to hold down the Alt key and just select that loop right there. And then I'm going to hold down the Shift and Alt key and select that loop right there. Now I want to scale these in, so I'm going to press S to scale, but then I don't want to scale them in on the Z axis. So to exclude the Z axis, I'm going to press Shift Z. Then I can scale this down a little bit and just place it right there. I could also hold down the Alt key, select that loop right there, and then scale it down just a little bit. Tab to go back to object mode, and that is looking very good. Let's press Control S to save the Blender file. Now this entire handle is actually really big. If I press Shift A and just add like a cube, you can see the cube is actually quite small, because when we added the bolt with the bolt generator, it does make the bolts really quite big. So I'm just going to delete this cube here. So I just want to select this object and scale it down quite a bit. So in object mode with this selected, I'm going to press S to scale, and then I'm going to type in 0.3 and then enter. So that is much smaller. And then just so that any modifiers aren't messed up with the size or anything, I want to apply the scale of this object. So that this is the new default scale. So I'm going to press Control A, and then I'm going to click on scale. So that's going to apply the scale. So this is now its new default scale. All right, so I now want to add some modifiers to give this a little bit more geometry, kind of smooth out the edges a little bit. And then I also want to shade this smooth so you can't see all those blocky bits. So with this object selected, I'm going to click on Add Modifier, and we're going to add a Bevel Modifier. So it's right here under Generate, add a bevel. So we're going to add a Bevel Modifier to smooth out these little edges. Now this Bevel Modifier on default has an angle limit, and so if the angle is smaller than this limit, then it's not actually going to bevel it. And I want to use the angle limit because I don't want to bevel all of these faces here. I want it to be smooth around, but then for instance right here, this is a 90-degree angle, and I do want it to bevel that. Now I do want to turn the angle limit up, so I'm going to turn the angle limit to 50. So now it's actually beveling those edges. But then right here on the side, it's not adding a bevel there because that is much smoother. And then right here on the segments, I'm going to turn the segments up to 2 so that it has a bit more detail. So if you zoom in here to the edge, you can see now there's 2 bevels there. And then let's also turn the amount down because I do want to make it a bit smaller. And I am going to be using an amount of 0.005. I think 0.005 is a pretty good size. And that way the edges of the metal will just be a little bit round. And then using the object context menu, I can click on shade smooth. So now the object is shaded smooth. Now if you zoom in here to the handle, you can see there are a few areas where the bevel modifier isn't beveling. So I can just add some loop cuts in here to make it sharper. So I'm going to press the tab key to go into edit mode, and actually need to go right down here to the bottom. So we need to add some loop cuts right here. So I'm going to press Ctrl R to add a loop cut. I can click, and then I'm going to drag all the way down and just place it there pretty close. We don't want it to be overlapping, but just place it pretty close right there. So if I tab to go back to object mode, now that looks really sharp there. I'm going to tab to go back into edit mode, and I'm going to press Ctrl R to add another loop cut, click right there, and I'm just going to drag this up and place it right there pretty close. And then also right here, it isn't actually adding a bevel, so this actually looks really smooth. So I'm going to tab to go back to edit mode, and I'm going to hold down the Alt key and just select that loop right there. So I'm now going to press Control B. Control B is going to add a manual bevel, but then I want to scroll my mouse wheel down so that there's just one cut, and then I'm going to make it really small. And you can also hold down the Shift key when you're doing this to make your movements more sensitive, and I'm going to make that really small and then just place it right there. So I can tab to go back to object mode, and now you can see there's a sharp point right there and a sharp point there and there. Let's press Ctrl S to save. All right, so the bar object is finished. So we can now create those circular weight plates. So I'm going to press Shift S, and then I'm going to move my mouse to cursor to world origin. That way the 3D cursor here will just be placed in the center. So when we add objects, the objects will be in the center there. So I'm going to press Shift A, and I'm going to go here to mesh, and I'm going to add a cylinder. Now I want to scale this up to make it a lot bigger, so I'm going to press 7 on the numpad for top view, and I can press the tab key to go into edit mode. So I'm going to press S to scale, but then I don't want to scale it on the Z axis, I just want to scale it out on the X and Y. So I'm going to press Shift Z, and that will exclude the Z axis. Now you can see that there's some grids here, so there's 1 grid, 2 grids, and 3 grids. So I want to scale this up so it is covering about 2 3/4 of a grid. So I'm just going to place this there. I'm actually going to hold down the Z button and go into wireframe so you can see the grids a bit better. So you can see there's 1 grid, and then 2 grid, and then 3 grids. So again, I'll press S to scale. I can press Shift Z to exclude the Z axis. So this is 2 grids, and then this is 3 grids. So I just want to scale it about this big, so it's about 2 3/4 of the grids there. Place it about there. And that's the size that I found to work best, and I did also take reference images of my dumbbells to get the size as accurate as possible, and I think this is the best size. But these adjustable dumbbells have many sizes of the weight plates, so you can really scale this to whatever size you like. Now if I press 1 on the numpad to go to front view, you can see this is way too thick. So I want to make this much smaller. So I'm going to hit S to scale, and then I'm going to hit Z to scale it on the Z axis. And then I want to make this much smaller, so I'm going to actually scale this by a value of 0.4, and that way it's a little less than half the size. And then I can just hit the Enter key. But you can also just hit S to scale it on the Z axis, and scale that to a size that works well for you. So actually if I move this up and place it on a grid, it's going to be a little bit bigger than half a grid. So I can press the tab key to go back to object mode. I can hold down the Z button and go back into solid view. Now I want to model some details here on the side, and so I want those details to be mirrored over to the other side. So I can just delete half of this and then add a mirror modifier. So I'm going to press tab to go to edit mode. I'm going to press Ctrl R to add a loop cut, and then I can left click and then right click so it stays in the center. And then I'm going to hold down the Alt key and just select that loop of vertices right there. And then I can press X to delete, and I'm going to delete the vertices. Now I want to mirror this down here. So I'm going to click on add modifier, and I can add the mirror modifier. And then I don't want to mirror it on the X axis. I want to mirror it up and down, which is on the Z axis. So I'm going to uncheck the X and then click on the Z. So now it's mirroring it up and down. And because the origin point was in the very center there, it's mirroring that correctly. And then also to merge the center vertices, you can click on the clipping button. So that way, if you bring this up, you can see the clipping is turned on, so it's going to keep that merged in the center. So I'm now going to click right up here to go to the face select. And I'm just going to select this face. And I can press the I key to inset this face, and I'm going to bring it down and place it about there. Then I'm going to press E to extrude, and I want to extrude this down on the Z axis, and I want to make this a bit smaller and just place it about there. Then I want to scale this down a little bit, so I'll hit S to scale that down just a little bit, and then I want to press I to inset. We're going to inset that face, and we're just going to bring this down. I'm going to make it about that thick there. And then I want to extrude this back up, so I'm going to press E to extrude. Make sure you're extruding it up on the Z axis and just place it there. And then I can scale this on the Z axis and make it a little bit smaller, just like that. Now I want this face right here and these faces right here to be at the same point. So just select this interface, and then I'm going to hold down the Shift and Alt key and then select that loop of faces right there. And then I want to scale them so that they're at the same spot. So I can hit S to scale, then I can hit Z to scale it on the Z axis, and then I can type in 0 and enter. So that's going to flatten them to the same spot. And then I also need to make a hole right here in the center so that this can actually go through the bar. So first I'm just going to press tab to go back to object mode, and I'm going to press G and Z, and I'm going to bring up the entire object up in object mode and place it there. And then I can press the tab key to go back to edit mode. So I can now just select this face right here, and I'm going to press 7 to go to top view, and I now want to inset this face, so you can press the I key to inset, and I'm going to make this much smaller, and it's just going to be a tiny little bit bigger than the center there. So just place it right there, and that way I can extrude this back in, and then it can slide through the bar there. So I can now press E to extrude, and we're going to bring that down and just push it all the way down so it connects with the mirror. And if you zoom into the object there, you can see that's now connecting with the mirror. Now we have an extra face in there, and I don't want that face in there, so I'm going to press X to delete, and I can delete the faces. So I can now tab to go back to object mode, and just real quick, I'm going to select this object right here, and I can press the H key to hide it. So now that it's hidden, you can see we have that hole in there. And so let's just finish up the modeling for this object. So just like the other object, I want to add a bevel modifier to bevel out the sides here. So I'm going to click on add modifier, and let's add the bevel modifier under generate. Now on the segments right here, I want to turn this up to 3 so it has a bit more detail. And then I'm going to hold down the Shift key and drag the amount to make that smaller. And I'm going to be using an amount of 0.05. I think 0.05 is pretty good. And then using the object context menu, I can shade this smooth. Now you can see right here on the edges, it does look just a little bit blocky, and that's because it is just a little bit low poly. So to smooth this out, I can add the Subdivision surface modifier. So the shortcut key is Control 1. So I'm holding down the Control key and then clicking the 1 on the top of my keyboard. Or you can also click here and add modifier and add the Subdivision surface. So right here on the Subdivision surface, if you scroll down, I want the levels viewport and render to both be set to 1. And that's going to smooth it out so you can see that is much smoother now. And then I can press Alt H to unhide all the other objects so we can see this now. Now this inner loop right here, I actually want to make this quite a bit smaller. So I'm going to tab to go back to edit mode, and I'm going to hold down the Alt key and just select that loop of faces. And then I want to scale it in. So I'm going to hit S to scale, but I don't want to scale it down on the Z axis because that'll actually make it smaller. So I'm going to hit Shift Z, and that way it'll exclude the Z axis, and I'm going to make it a bit smaller, maybe about that big, place it there. And then I can also hold down the Alt key and select that loop of faces there, and I think I want to bring this in a little bit. So I'll hit S to scale, and I can press Shift Z, and I'm going to bring that down just a little bit and then place it there. All right, and then right here on the edge, I want to make this a bit more round. So select this object again and tab to go into edit mode. And I want to select the vertices here. So I'm going to click right up here to go to the vertex select. I can hold down the Alt key and just select that loop of vertices there. And then I'm going to press S to scale and just scale that up just a little bit and place that there. And then I can also add a loop cut in here. So I'm going to press Control R, and I'm going to left click and right click to place it in the center there. And then I can press S to scale and just scale that up a little bit. Maybe hold down the Alt key and select that loop right there and scale that up just a little bit. Tab to go back to object mode. You can see now on the edge that is just a little bit round, and I do like how that looks. objects. Alright, so we have a mirror modifier on this object, and so it's mirroring this side over to the other side. But I want to add another mirror modifier so it mirrors it over to the other side of the dumbbell weights. So we can actually add multiple mirror modifiers. So the first mirror modifier is just mirroring it over from the object's origin, but I'm now going to click on add modifier, and under generate, let's add another mirror modifier. Now if I scroll way down, I want this mirror modifier to be mirroring it from the center of this object, not the center of this object. So with this object selected, scroll down here, I can click on this mirror object. I'm actually going to click on the eyedropper, and then I can select this handle here. And so this way it's going to mirror it from the center of the handle. So click back on this object and scroll down. Now you can see it's not actually mirroring that over, and that's because it's mirroring on the y-axis. So I'm going to click on this to get rid of the y, and I'm going to click here on the z so it's mirroring it over on the z-axis. So now in object mode, I can press G to grab, and then I can hit Z and I can bring it up and down, and I can place it right there. So we can bring this along the handle. So I'm going to zoom in here and then press G and Z and just bring that down and just place it right there. Now I do want to have more weight plates, but I want this other one to be a bit smaller. So I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate and then hit Z to bring it up on the Z axis. So we now have another one. And if you want those to be the same size, you could just leave that how it is. You could also, of course, continue to duplicate them and make these weights really heavy. I'm just going to go with 2. So I'm going to just duplicate that one and bring it up. Now I want to make this other one a bit less wide. So I'm going to press the Tab key to go into edit mode and press the A key to select everything. So I want to make this just a bit smaller. Now I don't want to scale the inner loop right here because that would make it so that it can't actually go through the handle. So I'm going to hold down the Shift and Alt key and then just select that loop right there, and that'll deselect it. And then I also need to zoom in here and go inside there and hold down the Shift and Alt key again and then select that loop right there, and that'll deselect it. So if I hold down the Z button, go to wireframe, you can see those inner loops are deselected, but everything else is still selected. So I'm going to go back to solid view. So I can now hit S to scale, but then I don't want to scale it on the Z axis. So I'm going to hit Shift Z to exclude the Z axis, and I'm going to scale this down just a bit smaller and then just place that about there. And you can scale that to whatever size looks good to you. All right, that is it. That is pretty good. So we have a bigger one and a smaller one. And then of course in object mode, you can press G and Z and you can bring this along the handle there. And I'm just going to bring it down on the Z axis and stick it right there. Let's press Ctrl S to save. All right, so I'm now going to be creating that star-shaped piece, and that star-shaped piece is the piece that actually rotates here on the screw, and it keeps the weight plates on the bar. So to use this, I'm going to be using Blender's bolt add-on again. So just press Shift S and make sure you go to cursor to world origin so the cursor is in the center there. So I can now press Shift A and let's go to mesh, and we can click on bolt. And then again, if you click right behind me, right when you add the bolt, click on the add bolt settings, that'll open this up here. Now to make that star shape, we're going to go right here to the bit type, and I'm going to change this to the torques. So when I change that to torques, now you can see there's that really cool star shape right there. So that is what I'm going to be using to create the star shape. So I can just click here to close the add bolt settings, and then I can press the tab key to go into edit mode. So now what I'm going to do is click right up here to go to the face select, and I'm going to hold down the alt key and select that loop of faces right there. I'm now going to press Ctrl I, and Ctrl I is going to invert the selection so everything else is selected, and then I can just press X to delete, and I'm going to delete the faces. So now we just have that star piece. And then the object's origin is way down there, so I'm going to press the A key to select everything. I can press G and then Z, and I'm just going to bring it down right there so that's in the center there. So I can now press the tab key to go back to object mode, and in object mode I'm going to press G and Z, and I'm just going to bring this up so we can see it better. And then I can tab to go back to edit mode. So I'm now going to click right up here to go to the vertex select. And I now want to extrude this out and then scale it in so it has thickness. So I'm going to press E to extrude and then S to scale. We're going to scale this down, but I'm going to hit Shift Z to exclude the Z axis, so we just scale that in. And I'm going to bring it in to about that big. Now I want this part right here to be circular so that it fits here in with the screws. So this is where the Loop Tools add-on comes in, and we turned on the Loop Tools add-on at the beginning of this video. So if I press the N key to open up the side panel, I can click here on the edit here on the side panel, just click on edit, and you can open up the Loop Tools. And And then with just those vertices selected there on the inner part, I'm going to click on a circle, and this is going to change it to a circular shape. So now let's press 7 on the numpad to go to top view, and I'm actually going to press the A key to select everything, and then I'm going to press S to scale, and I'm going to scale this down a bit smaller, and I'm going to scale it down to about that big, so that's kind of about as big as that little crease right there in the smaller weight plates. So I can press 7 again for top view, just scale that down about that big. So now I can hold down the Z button, go into the wireframe, and I can press A to deselect everything. So I can now press the C button, and the C button is going to give me the circle select. I'm going to scroll my mouse wheel to make the circle select bigger, and then I'm just going to click right there to select all the inner vertices. And then I can press the escape key to get out of the circle select. So I can hold down the Z button and go back to solid view, and I now want to scale this down so it's the same size as the screw there. So I'm going to press S to scale, and then I want to hit Shift Z to exclude the Z axis, and I'm going to scale it down to about that big and then just place that there. Alright, so that is a good size. Now it is a bit too thick up and down, so I'm going to press 1 on the numpad to go to front view. I can also press the N key to close that side panel. So just double tap the A key to make sure everything is selected, and I want to hit S to scale. I'm going to hit Z to scale on the Z axis and make that probably about only half the size, so something like that. I can also press G and Z and bring it down right there and then place it there. So I'm now going to press the tab key to go back to object mode, and I actually want to see this in local view just so that the other objects are hidden for now, because I want to kind of see the bottom area. So on the numpad, I'm going to hit the / button, and that is going to take me into local view of the object, so I can just see this object here. Or if you wanted to, you could just select these objects and then press the H key to hide them. I'm just going to select this object here and then hit the / on the numpad to go into local view so I can see the bottom. So I'm going to press the tab key to go into edit mode, and then I want to add a loop cut right here to kind of give this some thickness and extrude it down. So I'm going to press Ctrl R to add a loop cut, and I can left click and then right click so it stays in the center. And then I want to press the N key again to go back to the side panel, go back to the loop tools here, and with that loop selected, I can click on circle again to make that a circle. And then I can press the N key to close the side panel. So I now just want to press S to scale, and I'm going to scale this down to about there. And then I want to click right up here to go to the face select mode, and I can hold down the Alt key and just select that loop of faces right there. And I can press 1 on the numpad to go to front view. So I can now press E to extrude, bring it down on the Z axis, and I'm going to place it right there. Maybe bring it down just a little bit farther. Alright, press the tab key to go back to object mode, and then I can press the / again to go out of local view. And there we go, so there's that little star piece. So just like the other objects, I want to give this star piece the bevel modifier to smooth it out. So I'm going to click on add modifier, and let's go down here and add the bevel modifier. And then on the segments here, I am going to turn this up just to 4. And then using the object context menu, I can shade this object smooth. Now if I zoom in here to the top, you can see there's some weird stretching right there. So to get rid of that weird stretching, I can add the subdivision surface modifier. So I can just press Ctrl 2. Ctrl 2 will add the subdivision surface modifier, but then I don't actually need 2 levels, so I can click on the arrow here to turn this down and turn this down, just so it's using 1 level of subdivision. And actually right here on the bevel modifier, I could just turn this down a little bit smaller, so maybe I'll just turn the segments to 3 so it's a little bit lower poly. And then also I can hold down the shift key and change the amount there of the bevel to change that thickness. And I'm going to change the amount here to a 0.005, just a 0.005, so that is pretty small, but it still does have a bevel. Alright, so I can now select the star piece and make sure you are in object mode, and I can press G to grab, and I can bring this down on the Z axis, and I'm going to place it right there. So this is going to hold the weights in place. Now right down here again, you can see that it isn't mirroring it over to the other side, so just select this object here, select the star piece, and I can click on add modifier, and let's add the mirror modifier Modifier. Now we don't want to mirror it on the x-axis, we want to mirror it up and down on the z-axis, so click here to turn off the x, and then click here to turn on the z. Now it's mirroring it from the center of the object's origin, but I want to mirror it from the center of the handle. So right here on the mirror object, you can click on this eyedropper, and then just click right there on the handle. And that's going to mirror it over to the other side, so you can press G and Z, and you can move this up and down, and you can adjust the dumbbell. Alright, so the modeling is finished. So I now just want to parent all the other objects to the handle, so when we move the handle, the other objects move with it. So I'm going to select this object, and then hold down the Shift key and select the other objects, and then lastly, Shift and select the handle. We want the handle to be selected last, so it is the parent, and then the others are going to be the child objects. So I'm now going to press Ctrl P, and then I'm going to set parent to object keep transform. And because the handle was the last object that was selected, the handle is the parent object, and then the other objects here are the child objects. And the child objects can move around separately on their own, but when the parent object moves, the child objects will move with it. So now I can select this handle right here, and I'm going to press R to rotate, and let's rotate this on the y-axis, and then I can type in 9, 0, and enter to rotate it by 90 degrees. So just press Ctrl S to save, and this is going to wrap it up for part 1 of the dumbbell weights tutorial series. So I'm going to be posting part 2 the next day after I post this video, so when part 2 is released, it'll be right up there on the end screen and also the link in the description. And in part 2, we're going to be doing the lighting and the materials and the rendering and the compositing to get the final image. So I hope you've been enjoying this tutorial, and thank you for watching. And again, if you'd like to help support me and this YouTube channel, then I'll have links in the description to my Gumroad store and my Patreon page and the YouTube memberships. And I do appreciate your support. But thank you for watching, and I will see you in part 2.